Without further ado, let's add some CSS to an actual HTML page. All right, let's go on ahead and make sure we have our Visual Studio Code open up in your browser or terminal. Let's see here. I'll close this 1 second. All right. And what we're going to do is let's create an actual file itself. And here is our mouse. Let's create an actual file by clicking on the new file icon in Visual Studio Code. And we're going to call that, let's go with intro CSS.html because it is an actual HTML page. And to get a bare bones boilerplate HTML or HTML template, we're going to put an exclamation mark or point. And from here, what we're going to do, let's just call this intro to, or actually not even that, adding CSS file to page. Nice long title. All right. And let's also, let's see. Oh, well, let's open this up with live server as well. There we are. So we have that up and running. Let's do a quick test just to see if we can see anything on the actual page. Hi there. All right, perfect. So we actually have hi there on the actual page itself. And let's see here. What we're going to do is we have our file intro_CSS HTML. We need to actually add an additional CSS file to the page. So normally what we would do is just go in here and add an actual page. And this is going to be a CSS file. So let's just call it the same thing, intro_CSS, but it is not going to be a .html page in which we've been working with in the past. This is going to be a .css. All right. And what you'll notice here is now Visual Studio Code has we have a HTML file called intro_CSS.html, and we have an intro_CSS or intro_CSS.css. You can name this anything you want, but make sure it ends in .css. So now we have our style sheet and we have our HTML page. So we want to link those together so we can actually make changes. So what does that actually mean? Well, first, let's add the file to our HTML page. So let's close this. All right, and we'll go right here slightly above the title, and we're going to link that CSS page to the HTML file. And I'm going to just type in intro, or actually in, and you'll notice I have two options here. I can go on ahead and add the .css file. It wouldn't make sense to add the same file that we actually have here. So what we're going to do is just add the .css file. So now we can make some changes here, and it's going to actually affect the actual markup pages that we have here. So let's actually make a little sense of this. Let's split this file to the right by right-clicking on the file, on our CSS file. We're going to split this to the right. Okay, and I'm just going to close it over here so this way we can see the HTML and the CSS at the same time. I'm going to just bring this down just a little bit. Okay, and again, that link here, this is just pretty much for this href, we're just saying where is our CSS file. All right, we have hi there already. So first, let's go over well, what we can actually do. Let's actually put a little markup there, some markup that's going to make a little sense for us. So let's add something to the page. So what we can do is let's add ourselves a div, in which we've worked with divs previously, which is just pretty much going to be like this. And now we have an actual div, which is a block level element. So you cannot see anything on the page as of yet. But what we can go on and do is add something within that. So let's just add an image. All right. And actually before that, yeah, let's go on ahead. Let's add our image here. And for the source, we have some images already in our image directory or images directory. And let's go with bird1. All right. And for the alt text, I'm just going to actually just put bird. All right, alt text, that's just for the screen readers, or if the image for some reason doesn't actually show up, at least there's some text that's saying, hey, there was an image here. All right, so now we have an image on the screen. It's way too big, way too big. So now let's go to our CSS page, which is right here, which is also linked to the HTML file because we linked it right here. All right, I just added that on a different line just so it can be a little smaller, but here it is. Link, and it's going to be a style sheet, and it's the href, and the destination of that is intro_css. And if we go back to our Explorer options here, we see two files again. Okay, so let's close that, and now let's actually select the image. Let's target that. So we're going to select it first by when we're working with CSS, we have a thing that's called rules. And with those rules, it consists of a selector. And in our case, the selector is going to be the image. Then we open up the rule beginning with an actual selector, or I'm sorry, actually with a curly brace. So we'll open the curly brace, and if I can say it correctly, and we'll close the curly brace. And some may say curly bracket, but we'll just call it curly brace for now. So now we have the actual rule here, but within the rule, we need a declaration. And that declaration is going to consist of a property and a value. And in this case, our property for the image is going to be the actual width. So for the width of the image, we're going to make it, let's say 100 pixels in width. And now you notice to the left, we have our image, which is much smaller and easier to see. So let's go on ahead. I think we'll do 150 for width. Pixels will be the unit. Width here is, so this entire line here is called a declaration within our rule. And the width is the actual property. And what is the width? The actual value of the width is actually here. So value, property, the entire thing is a rule, and we're selecting the image. This is our selector image. And we'll actually have another video on different types of selectors, but today we're just adding the actual page, the actual CSS page to the HTML. Okay, because usually what you want to do is you want to work with your markup, and you want to have your CSS that is controlling the markup on how it actually looks. So you want that to be completely separate. All right, and this way, of course, more than one person can work on that. In addition to that, it just keeps your workflow much easier and smoother. All right, so now we have our image. So let's add a little more markup here. So here we have our image. It is within a div, and let's see. Let's add an ID to the actual div. So we're going to actually have an image. We'll probably add see if we can add some text and have everything contained within this actual div for the structure. So we're going to call this card wrapper. All right, and then what we're going to do with card wrapper is we have an ID. This ID is uniquely associated with the actual wrapper. We can't see the wrapper, but you know what? Let's go on ahead and do something here. We'll put the hashtag symbol because we want to reference the ID. And you know, it's weird because this hashtag is also sometimes called a number sign or a pound, or if you really want to be extreme, you can just say it's the tic-tac-toe symbol. But for short, we're going to call it the hashtag for this series. So hashtag what? Hashtag the ID name of the wrapper, which is card wrapper, which is right here. Once we reference that, then we can start adding a new rule with that ID. And just so we can see the actual wrapper itself, let's add a border, and it's going to be 1 pixel, and that's going to be our measure. It's going to be our unit of measure. It's going to be solid, and it's going to be black. Let me slide that over a little bit more so you can see that. Okay. And then from there, what are we going to do after that? So we see our actual border itself. Let's give it a width. Width will be the property, and which up here, border was the property. The value of border is 1 pixel solid black. An additional declaration will be width. Width is the property, and the value of property is, we're going to say, let's have it be 400 pixels in width. So you notice to the left that the actual width of the box did shrink. And we're actually going to add, we're going to center this. So in order to center this, we're going to say top and bottom margin is going to be 0, and left and right, I want the browser to automatically decide what that's going to be, and that's going to automatically center the entire div element and everything within that div element centrally on the screen. And so now we have that. And now that we have that, let's go back up to the width of the image and let's make it 100% of the actual div. Okay, so that'll work there. That's perfect. Now the image is much bigger and it's taking up the full content of the actual of the actual div itself. Now, what can we do next? Let's add a universal selector, which we'll cover when we actually go over the different types of ways to select something. So I'm going to add box sizing to everything. So this universal selector here says these styles are going to be associated with all of our rules. So this box sizing is going to be applied to all of the rules that we have within our CSS file. And what this box sizing does is it says, you know what, no matter what the not the margin, but whatever the actual padding and border is, even if you change your width up or down, we're gonna automatically adjust it so it just fits within the width size. And that's something we'll cover later on in the series. But for now, we're gonna do box sizing and border box. Okay. And so let's see what's that going to do here. So that's going to be associated with all of the rules. Do we have any other additional markup? We definitely need some. And let me just put this down on an additional line. And let's add some more markup so we can start to see, all right, how can we select some things here? There's going to be a number of CSS rules and selectors and properties and values that we actually go over continuing down the course of CSS. So this one we'll just try to keep a little short, but let's add an H1 and let's put something here. Let's say the majestic birdie. Let's go with birdie. All right, and let's add an ID to that. We'll say ID equals our heading ID. Okay, and now what we can do is let's use that ID name over in our CSS file. So we go over to our CSS file, which we place to the right. We're going to use our tic-tac-toe symbol or hashtag or number sign or pound. And we're going to use the actual name of the ID. And now that we opened our curly braces and closed them, we can now add our declarations with the actual values with the actual properties and values. So in this case here, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, you know what, for the heading, let's make the color green. And then we'll look to the left and we see that the color has changed to green, just the text, all of this here. All right. And just in case you missed that, we can make that text red. So now we're just changing the actual property values here. Okay, so you see that it's red. If we wanted it black, which I believe is the default, or actually we'll just go with brown, and now it's brown. So we're going to keep it at green. And let's say we want to adjust the font. We can go font family for the property, and we're going to use Arial and all of the additional things that are available. If Arial doesn't work, it'll just default to Helvetica and sans serif. All right, and let's see here. Let's add a little padding here as well. Well, actually, We're not going to be able to see the padding as yet, so let's just wait on that. So now we have a picture, we have the majestic birdie, and we have a nice, very nice rule here with 2 declarations within it, consisting of a color property with a value of green and a font family property with a value of Arial. Hey, what happened to the rest of it? So Arial, press tab, there we go. So Arial, Helvetica, and sans serif. So these are pretty much, they all look relatively the same. And let's see, what else can we add here? We have the picture, we have the heading. Let's go back over to our markup, which is over here. I'm just gonna press enter. And let's add a little paragraph. So P, and now we're gonna add a class name to this. So the class is just going to be any name that you would actually want. So class name for paragraph. There we go. And what we can do now is, instead of using the actual selector image or the ID, not the ID, but now we're going to use class name. And when we use the class name for our selections within CSS, what we do here is we start with a dot and then the actual class name. And that's how we would actually use our rule here. So we're using, if you notice here, for the IDs, we're using hashtag. For the class, we are using a dot. Okay. And we'll get more into that, in which, sometimes elements may have more than one class, but your actual elements are going to only uniquely have only one ID. So there's so many different ways to actually select items or select HTML markup. And again, we'll go over that as we continue down the course of CSS portions. Okay. All right. So now what do we got here? Oh, looking super messy over there. And we have a paragraph with no text in it. So as we've seen before, we can do lorem 20 or however much text that you actually want. And now we have some text here. And let me just hit enter just to kind of break it down so we can see what's on our screen. All right. And I'm just hitting enter just so you can see it on the actual screen itself. Good, good. So now we have some default text. So that's perfect. And what do we want to add here? Let's change the font to that. So let's go with font size 24. All right. And now we have the font that has changed. The color is already black. We'll keep it black. But just in case the color was not black, we would do color black. Also, if you wanted to do a color of hexadecimals, we can do something like this, in which that's the hex value for that as well. But we'll go over that a little and in more detail later. So the color, we'll just keep it at black, and let's add a little padding to that so it's not touching up on the actual borders of the wrapper. So here, this is something that we'll cover further down the road. This is the box model of saying, you know what, for the padding. Padding is going to be everything around the actual paragraph itself. So let's do a little example here. Let's put a border of 1px solid black. All right, so now you see the border, which is around the actual paragraph itself. Okay. All right, now if we were to add padding here, then you're going to notice some padding between the borders and the actual text, only within the paragraph. Okay, so that's only with what's highlighted on the left. So let's add some padding, and all the way around that padding, we're going to say, let's say there's 10 pixels of width. All right, so now we have some padding. Notice to the left, there is 10 pixels on the left, the right, or the top, the right, and the bottom, all the way around. If we increase that to 20, then you'll notice more spacing, more padding. There you go. So now we're bringing in our markup here. Okay, so we have the border, and then this white space around here is all padding. All right, so what we're going to do here is I just want padding on the left. So I could say padding left. All right, and just for the left side, we'll do 5 pixels. All right, and in our case, let's just go with about 9. That'll look a little better. Of course, if I wanted to use a box model, which we'll talk more about later, I can go padding on the left, 0, padding on the top, 0, padding on the right, 0, and then padding on the left, 9 pixels. And there's our 9 pixels, but only on the actual left. And now that that's there, let's take that border out, because sometimes we just use borders to see what it looks like. There we go. Align that up. All right, so that looks good. And now that text is not lined up with the actual heading of the bird, or yeah, the heading for the bird. So let's go back up to our heading rule, or our heading ID, and let's copy this padding. Let's use that and see what that looks like. All right, we'll paste that in there. And now we notice the actual heading has moved over 9 pixels. Because the text is, because of the T, it doesn't really look aligned as much. So let's just go down a little bit. Let's see what we can use here. Let's try 5. All right, that looks a little better. All right, and so now we have the heading and the actual paragraph text, which is actually aligned. So that is good. So what do we have here? We have a picture. We have, it kind of looks like you might see on the internet a number of this on news articles where you have a card, and a card may consist of some type of image, an actual heading, and the actual text about the actual article or card itself. I believe we can jazz this up just a little bit more. Let's go to our image. We only have a width of 100, but you know what? Let's add, let's go with height. I'm just going to set the height to auto just in case this were to shrink. Then pretty much it would automatically resize itself. And then what we're going to do is let's add a border just to the image, because again, we are in the image rule. We are in the selector for the actual image, and the properties and values are only associated with the image. Now, of course, if we had more than one image on this page, then this rule would be for all images. So we would either need to use a unique ID name or a class name. So let's add a border. We're going to make it 4 pixels in width. And it's going to be solid and green. And let's see what that does. We have a little green border around the actual image itself. And let's also add some padding. And that's going to be all the way around of 5 pixels. And again, this is just for the image. And now we have some padding space around the image, and we have a border as well. The border is only 4 pixels in width, and the padding is 5 pixels. And that looks much better. That looks much better. It defines the image itself a little bit better. All right, and I think that's pretty much it for now. Is there anything else? Maybe? Of course. Let's go back to our page. Let's close our CSS file here. And so we have our external style sheet. We have, let's see what's missing here. We can always actually add some styles directly. Okay, so let's say we wanted to add actually, wait a minute here. Let's go here. So here's the external style sheet. All right, let's make sure that we have that open. Boom, perfecto. All right, external style sheet here, internal, or actually inline. We can add it still within the actual page. It's a little sloppy, but of course we once you start getting to a number of different styles and rules, you usually want to have that in an external style sheet. All right, you may have an external style sheet for your mobile applications or your tablet applications, but in this case, this style, let's say we just had one rule and it was just for the body, and I just wanted to say, you know what, the background color for the body is going to be light sky. What do we have? Light sky blue. Light sky blue. That's perfect. So now, if you notice to the left, we just changed one thing on the body, which is within our markup, and it's the background color for the body. So here's your external style sheet. Here is your inline style. And what else? We can actually add it as an attribute. Let's see, where do we want to go here? Let's add some type of style to our div. Where's our div? There we go. We can also add a style right here and say style as an attribute to the div element and add a background color. And then we can give it, well, what kind of background we want. If we were to change the background to red, which would be super nasty, yuck. Look at that to the left. Now we just added us one style to the as an attribute to the actual div element itself. That's a little messy. I don't like it, but you know, at least you get to see, you know, what's actually available. All right. So that is pretty much it. And let me just add an actual number here because we can use that. I don't want that to, don't want to end on that looking sloppy. So I'll use a hex value here. And let's get rid of that. Okay, so the gray is a little bit better. At least that's a little softer on my eyes. And that's it. We've added some actual CSS files, or actually one file, to our actual page. And you can see how the CSS will then actually allow your markup to look much better and much more professional. All right, other than that, any other comments or concerns, you can always email me. You can leave a comment. You can subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell as well, so you can actually know when upcoming additional videos are actually being released. And again, Mr. Stack is out. Please subscribe to the actual channel so you can get more information. Good night.